Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Mount and Blade to Bannerlord. Today we're going to be doing the final strengths and weaknesses episode, and well, for the foreseeable future I might go back and change the other ones because I know I probably didn't cover as many points as I should have, and I probably didn't cover them as clearly as I should have. So I might redo those in the future and just try and make them a little bit better if possible. But essentially what we're going to be looking at today is the strengths and weaknesses of the Empire, and not just one of the three factions. We're just going to be looking at them as a whole. So first off, when creating your character and selecting, you have your character culture, and picking the Empire gives you a 20% construction speed bonus to town projects, wall repairs and siege engines. Now, this isn't really useful at all for the early game. There is nothing really you can do with this unless you are very lucky, or not really lucky, but you get a town when you join a faction. If you join the Empire and they give you a faction, or you join Britannia and they give you, sorry, I'm saying faction, if they give you a town, sorry is what I meant, then this isn't really that helpful for the early game, and more for the late game when you start to take your own towns and castles. But what it is really useful for is your 20% construction speed bonus, which goes towards building siege engines. So town projects, wall repairs, yes, useful, but the siege engines a majorly useful component there, because one of the hardest things to do, especially if you're out on your own, is trying to besiege a castle, because you want to do it as quickly as possible without having an army turn up to try and kill you. So having that 20% extra construction speed towards building your catapults, trebuchets, battering rams or siege towers is incredibly useful, and will majorly speed it up and allow you to assault the castle or town before the enemy can show up. They still probably will show up, but it does make obviously 20% difference, and it can really make the difference between winning or losing that settlement. The wall repairs as well, again, very useful. It allows you to rebuild those walls that you've just torn down a lot quicker. So trying to defend your newly captured castle or town, it will be a lot easier when you can finally repair those walls and stop the enemy from coming straight through into your town or castle. So as a skill, not the best in the world, but pretty useful when it comes to starting out your own kingdom or empire. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next thing. Okay, so here we are, we've arrived at Donestica. So it's put us into the Southern Empire. We did this on sandbox mode, so just bear in mind, I don't know if it is random. This is the first time I've really done a sandbox with the Empire, so it could place you in any three of the empires, but for me it's done at the Southern Empire. I don't know if this is the same for everyone. This could be completely different. What we're just going to do is pick up some recruits here, just so we don't get attacked by any bandits along the road. So the first thing to bear in mind is the strategic location of the Empire as a whole. So it's the largest faction if you don't separate the three. They cover the entire central part of the map, and obviously yes, you have the three main factions. They're not too different, obviously all the units are the same, but what they really differ in is their enemies. So whichever faction you decide to align yourselves with, you will have your set enemies. So if you're part of the Southern Empire, your main threat will most likely be the Khuzait Khanate. Most likely. One thing I will say is the Empire loves to civil war, so more often than not you'll find yourself fighting against the Empire, which in terms of troop quality and troop type is quite easy, because you know what you're up against. You don't really have to change up your tactics and strategy too much, because you're going to be fighting the exact same men as you will have. So it's not too difficult, but yeah, you will find yourself fighting against the other Empire a lot. And their settlements and villages are very close and tightly packed together, so it will be quite an intense war with constant battles raging everywhere you go. Unlike where you go to war with the Khuzait Khanate, there's a little bit more further apart. So yeah, just bear that in mind. But yeah, the strategic location, there aren't too many natural borders that protect you. If you're part of the Southern Empire or Western Empire, you do have this huge sea coming through here, which gives you a lot of protection from the south. But the Northern Empire, you have a similar sort of thing protecting you from Sturgia, but you've also got the main enemy of Britannia, Sturgia and the Khuzait Khanate, as well as the other empires to the south. So there are a lot of enemies, a lot of threats, and you'll find the empires usually get taken over on their borders fairly quickly usually, and try and fight quite hard to get it back. But they're still quite strong. They can form pretty big armies, and their economy is very, very powerful as well. Because they're sort of the central powers, The more central you get into these cities, the stronger their prosperity and economy will be. So they're also very good spots to set up trading like caravans and workshops and things along those lines. So very useful in that sense too. You're going to get very good armors and things like that. It's very useful. Very good places to own as well. Like I said, prosperity being very high is very useful. And as far as troop types go, the best thing about the Empire, and it's sort of the new players' kingdom to join, is because their troop types are so varied. You kind of have access to everything. So unlike where you have Britannia and your main focus will be on your infantry, and you only can get the archers if you get lucky enough to actually find them. Otherwise you have access to no archers, or with Valandia you'll only have your crossbowmen. With these guys you have everything. So you have your, I don't know why that's stuck on there. So you've got your infantry, your basic standard infantry, sword and shield. Then they move off and they split into two. So you can either go for heavy infantry or you can go for two-handed polearm infantry. So straight away you've covered two pretty major parts of the world there. So like I said, with Britannia and Valandia, you've got your billmen and your polearmsmen, who are obviously a lot better than the Imperial ones, but you do still have access to your polearmsmen here, as well as your one-handed infantry as well. And then when you go down the archer route, they give you just your box standard archers. Still pretty damn good archers. The Palatine Guard are fantastic archers. Not the best in the game, but they're still pretty good. And then you also have your crossbowmen as well, which most factions don't have. In fact, this is the only faction along with Valandia that has crossbowmen. So the Empire really does cover every aspect. Now their units are not the best in the game. They do not have the best infantry, they do not have the best archers or the best crossbowmen. But they also don't have the worst. Now none of these units are bad. They're just not the best. But they're still pretty damn good. They're kind of just good all over the board. Everything is just good. And that's why it's the easiest faction to play, because you get every unit type to play around with, and they just cover every aspect of what you need to go into battle with, or to change up your tactics, or to learn how to use certain unit types. They even give you horse archers, which again, along with the Khuzaits, this is the only other faction that has horse archers, except for if maybe you counted the Mamluks from the Azerite, which are kind of infantry / horse archers. But these guys are actually horse archers, which most other factions don't have. Now you might be thinking they don't have cavalry. Well, they do, and their cavalry, I'd say in my opinion, is the best cavalry in the game. I don't know if we'll be able to find them because they're quite difficult. We'll probably have to go through this way of doing it. So we'll go cavalry, then we'll go to, where are you, Empire, and then straight away. So we've got the LS Roy, but you've got to ignore these because these are just like mercenary units that you can hire. So the Imperial Vigler Recruit. Now, quite difficult to find. You kind of have to look for headhunters in villages to find these guys, but if you do, they are worth it. You get your Imperial Equites and then you get your Imperial Elite Cataphracts down the end of the line, and I think easily these guys are the best cavalry in the game. They have exceptional armour, absolutely brilliant armour. They have a huge Imperial Lance. Their horse has got ridiculous armour. The Imperial Cataphract horse armour is probably one of the strongest horse armours you can get in the game. Like I said, their main body armour is also exceptionally good, and their sword and shield is also exceptionally good. Now these guys are very hard to kill. They're very hard to bring down. They're very quick on their horses, and with their lance they can deal serious damage. They're also amazing on foot, so if you need to use them for sieges, these guys are fantastic infantry as well. Obviously not with their polearm, but with their sword and shield, they're still very capable soldiers on foot as well. And they're absolutely fantastic, but also quite expensive, and like I said, quite hard to find. But as you're building up, you don't really need too much cavalry. It's quite a nice thing to build up slowly. You only need a couple to begin with, so you kind of build up to about 10, 20 as your campaign progresses. And because these guys are so heavily armoured and so good, they're not going to be dying very quickly. So yes, it is difficult to find them, but once you find a village that does them, just keep kind of trying to progress your relationships with those headsmen, and constantly trying to improve that as well, and really trying to increase relations, and you could get more access to them. Luckily as well, because the Empire's prosperity is quite high, you'll find that they're probably easier to get the elite units with the Empire, especially as you have 3 separate kingdoms. So all of these kingdoms have the same units, like I said. So you can get those elite cataphracts from any one of the 3 empires. So that does make their accessibility a lot higher than most other factions who might only have 1 or 2 villages that offer them at the time. Whereas the Empire has 3 factions which have multiple villages that will offer these units up for you. So they are quite easy to get, and if you do find yourself at war with any other empires, you can defeat them in battle and obviously take those guys as prisoners, and that's another quite easy way of recruiting them too. So yeah, as far as the units are, these guys are good all over the board. Everything they have is strong, and you won't really find yourself lacking in any aspects. You really do have access to everything with these guys. So it's a very, very good, very easy faction to play with. Especially if you're starting out new at the game, and economically wise as well, very strong and very easy to use. And like I said, strategically on the placements, obviously it's probably the hardest faction strategically placed in the map, because you do have enemies on all sides of you, absolutely everywhere, no matter which faction you go to. There is no best faction. Every campaign is different, so every single one will have their different enemies. But like I said, if you're closer to the Crusade, you might struggle a little bit more, because the Crusade is a very strong, powerful faction that kind of steamrolls through most towns and villages with ease with their cavalry superiority. So if you are going for the north or south especially, you do have to look out for cavalry for the Crusade, and try and make sure you've got your tactics up to speed on how you're going to defeat them, and what units you're going to need to take them on the best. When it comes to the Azerite, obviously you've kind of got these choke points really, so actually going to war with them, you know that they're only going to be coming through Donustica or Vostrum, so you can anticipate and protect against them quite easily, especially if you kind of take the fight to Huss and Folk here. It's very easy to sort of defeat them in a war and get the upper hand. But yeah, a lot harder with the Crusade Khanate. Now, well, so yep, strong. Yeah, so they're very strong infantry. Like I said, they're not the best infantry in the world, but they do have very strong infantry. Their Imperial Legionary is probably maybe the second best infantry, the one-handed sword infantry you can get in the game. They're very, very capable, very strong, just all-round good units. They're very well armoured, all of the units as well, even the archers, they're quite well armoured. Like I said, Imperial Cataphracts as well, exceptionally well armoured. I'd say probably the biggest weakness of this faction is they're not very fast moving, because they're so well armoured, and that goes for all of their unit types. They're quite slow on the campaign map, and I'd say this is probably their biggest weakness, that it does drag you down quite significantly, and the lack of just all-round cavalry options is, it kind of brings you down a little bit. But obviously that slow moving can be made up for the fact that they're very capable units across the board. They also do lack polearms. Like I said, you've got the Men of Leontins, which are your polearm infantry, but you are lacking. So it's quite a short spear, and they don't have shields. So they're not the best polearm infantry in the game. They do have their polearms, but they're not very long, capable polearms. They're more of just short spears. They do also have javelins, I think, Men of Leons for throwing. So they also have that ability too, I think. Anyway, I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure they do. They also do have one-handed weapon too. But yeah, so they're capable, but this is kind of the only real polearm unit you have, and I wouldn't say that they're the best either, but not necessarily the worst. So the biggest strength of this faction is that it is just an all-round good faction. So every aspect of it is good, not the best, not the worst. It's just good. They're very, very average. And like I said, it goes across the entire board, so for all 3 of them, everything is the same. You'll have your crap villages and your very good villages too. It's just a matter of who you want to align yourselves with. And if you're going through the actual campaign method, you can either reignite one of them and combine them all, or you can take them over. Either your choice. But yeah. You'll find very capable leaders and companions with the Empire as well. And like I said, with their starting ability of that extra construction is also quite useful. Their tournaments as well are very easy to win. So starting off, if you want to boost your renown and your skills, taking on their tournaments is very easy, and you can get some incredibly good kit with that as well. Now, as far as trade, they offer some pretty decent weaponry, not the best in the world. I think it's just starting out, so there's not too much good stuff here at the moment. It's just because we've just started the game. But you can get some very, very good armour, probably some of the best armour in the game actually. Probably body armour, maybe not helmets. And weapons, they offer some very good spears and sword types. So there's a lot of useful aspects to these guys. And like I said, workshops wise, you'll probably get some of the just more average good ones in the centre of the empire, because their villages and towns are so good as far as prosperity is concerned. So you can make a lot of money with these guys too. But that's about it for these guys. Tactics with them, it generally depends on who you're going up against. But because you have access to such a wide variety of troops, any sort of tactics you work against anyone will work, because you will have all those different unit types which you need to counter everyone. You can literally counter any faction with the Empire, whereas if you pick a more specific kingdom like the Azerite or Kuzites, then you will have huge disadvantages, which means going up against certain factions will bring you down, whereas being part of the Empire, you can more or less go up against anyone, and it's a pretty even fight. So yeah, just generally an all-round good faction. You'll be very lucky to get a settlement with these guys, to get a town if you join them. But if you can get one of the more central ones, you'll be set really. Very, very useful. But that's about it, guys. I can't really think of much more else to say. I'm sure I've missed something. Please let me know down in the comments if I have, or if you've got any tips on how to use these guys, or just any knowledge of your own. Please pass it down in the comments below. I'm sure people love to hear it. But otherwise, yeah, that's all I can really think of for the moment. I will cover anything else if I can. Like I said, I'm probably going to redo these ones and try and do them a little bit more clearer, and cover a lot more points and aspects. Try and show all the units in combat as well. I have made tactics and strategy guides for how to use every faction. It's only just one tactic or strategy, but it is just like a basic one that you can kind of get an idea of how to use. And all of them work across the board as well. So it's just they're just little ideas to help you out, especially if you're new to the game. But otherwise, guys, yep, I hope this has helped. I hope this has covered a few points for these guys. Again, if I've missed anything, let me know. Or if you have any other questions that I haven't answered for these guys, please ask me down below. And I'll get back to that as soon as I can. But otherwise, guys, I hope this has helped. I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one. Goodbye.